In the suburbs of Texas, everything looks the same until it doesn't. Drive down the cul-de-sac where our HOA governs, and you'll see neat lawns trimmed with military precision, mailboxes painted in the exact shade of beige the board requires, and American flags rippling in the warm breeze. Every house is a mirror image of its neighbor, stucco facades and shingle roofs lined up like obedient soldiers. But then your eyes land on that house. The delinquent homeowner's property. It isn't falling apart, not yet, but it carries the unmistakable air of neglect. The grass runs too long between mowings. The shutters need paint. The driveway is cracked, with oil stains blooming like dark flowers. Packages pile up on the porch longer than they should, and the holiday lights, once festive, now hang limp in the July heat, as though no one cared enough to take them down. Most people drive past quickly, averting their eyes. But for us, the HOA board, this house is unavoidable. It represents everything we're supposed to control, everything the covenants and restrictions were designed to prevent. And worse than the appearances, worse than the gossip, is the number attached to it. Thousands of dollars in unpaid dues. I serve as one of 3 board members. We're volunteers, not professionals, but we're tasked with protecting the finances of the entire community. Our assessments keep the lights on, literally. They pay for landscaping, street maintenance, pool upkeep, legal fees, insurance. Without those funds, everything falters. And when one homeowner stops paying, it's not just a private matter. Their debt becomes everyone else's burden. Every dollar they withhold is a dollar we have to squeeze out of their neighbors. For months, we'd sent letters, notices, warnings, all ignored. The delinquency grew from a few hundred to a few thousand, snowballing as late fees and legal charges compounded. Other homeowners began whispering, "Why should I pay on time if he doesn't?" That was the real danger. Not just one man's stubbornness, but the infection of his example. If the HOA couldn't enforce its own rules, why should anyone comply? At first, we tried gentleness. Friendly reminders, phone calls, a knock on the door. No answer, or worse, a slammed one. Then we escalated. Formal violation letters, certified mail, demands for payment. Nothing. Eventually, our management company referred the matter to our attorneys. That was when the tone shifted from neighborly annoyance to cold legal procedure. The attorneys didn't see a homeowner. They saw a file, a balance sheet, a case. And in Texas, the law gives HOAs a powerful weapon: foreclosure. I still remember the first time the word came up in a board meeting. "We'll need to pursue foreclosure if this continues," the attorney said matter-of-factly, as though he were suggesting pruning trees. Greg, our HOA president, nodded grimly. "If that's what it takes." I sat back in my chair, the word echoing in my head. Foreclosure. That meant stripping someone of their house. Not just a fine, not just a lien, but the ultimate penalty: taking their home and selling it to cover what they owed. The attorney explained it clinically. The association has statutory authority, acting by and through its board of directors, to utilize the power of sale. This is permitted under Texas Property Code and your governing documents. If the owner won't pay, the association can proceed with non-judicial foreclosure. But the board must authorize it formally. The others nodded again, but I felt my stomach knot. It wasn't that I sympathized with the delinquent homeowner. He'd had every chance to pay. He knew the rules when he bought into the neighborhood. But something about wielding that kind of power unsettled me. We were volunteers, neighbors, ordinary people, and yet, with a stroke of a pen, we could effectively end someone's claim to their home. That night, I drove past his house again. The lights were off, the windows dark. I wondered what kind of man lived inside. Was he defiant, laughing at our letters as they piled up unopened? Or was he broken, drowning in debts, unable to face the reality that the HOA's invoices were just one more weight he couldn't carry? I didn't know, and maybe it didn't matter. But it gnawed at me. The following week, the attorneys sent us a packet of documents. The key among them was an authorization form. The board, acting by and through its directors, would appoint the attorneys as substitute trustee to conduct the foreclosure sale. All it required was a signature. I picked up the paper, ran my eyes across the dense paragraphs of legal text, and then froze when I reached the end. There, beneath the line for the association's name, was a line for mine. My name. Not just HOA Board of Directors, not just the association, but an actual person's signature, mine, or Greg's, or Linda's. Suddenly, the theoretical power of foreclosure was very real. I brought it up at the next board meeting. Do we have to put our names on this? Can't it just be the association? The attorney shook his head. The association only acts through its board. By statute, the directors authorize the action. That requires at least one of you to sign as representative. The signature doesn't expose you personally. It represents the corporate entity. But yes, your name will appear on the legal filing. Greg didn't flinch. If that's what's required, then so be it. Linda frowned but said nothing. I, however, couldn't let it go. My pen hovered, unwilling. I imagined my name on that document. A court filing. A foreclosure. My neighbors whispering. He's the one who signed to take the house. Even if I was only the messenger, the conduit, the representative of a larger machine, it was still my hand, my ink. And I wasn't sure I could stomach that. That night, as I typed the minutes of the meeting, I kept staring at the words. The board discussed proceeding with foreclosure against the delinquent homeowner. It looked clean, professional, detached. But beneath those words, in the silence between the lines, was a truth heavier than any bylaw. We weren't just enforcing rules. We were deciding someone's fate. And sooner or later, one of us would have to sign. The next board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. in the clubhouse. The air conditioner rattled in the corner, pushing warm air more than cooling it. Greg, our president, sat at the head of the table with his usual stern expression, his gavel resting like a weapon in front of him. Linda, the treasurer, had already spread out spreadsheets and financials in neat stacks. I sat beside her with my binder open, pen ready for the minutes. The room wasn't full, just a handful of homeowners had shown up, but everyone there knew what the big item on the agenda was. The delinquent homeowner. The foreclosure. Greg called the meeting to order, and after we dispatched the routine business, approving minutes, reviewing landscaping updates, he cleared his throat. Next item, he said, is the ongoing delinquency at 1420 Oakview. A hush settled over the room. Dan, our property manager, leaned forward. As of this month, the total owed is $7,846. That includes unpaid dues, late fees, and attorney's fees. We've sent multiple certified notices with no response. The attorneys recommend foreclosure. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was the letter from the law firm, printed on heavy paper. I'd already read it twice, but seeing it again made my stomach tighten. Greg glanced at it, then looked at us. We've given him more than enough chances. I say we move forward. Linda nodded briskly. It's not fair to the rest of the community. Everyone else pays their dues. Why should he get a free ride? I flipped through the documents, stalling. The words blurred. Power of sale, substitute trustee, non-judicial foreclosure. Each phrase carried the weight of finality. What if he's struggling? I asked quietly. What if it's not defiance but hardship? Greg's eyes hardened. Then he should have contacted us. We've offered payment plans in the past. He chose silence. He chose contempt, Linda added. And that contempt costs the rest of us. The pool doesn't clean itself. The landscaping doesn't trim itself. Somebody has to cover the gap. The attorney's letter left little room for doubt. The association, acting by and through its board of directors, has the statutory right under Texas Property Code to foreclose on the property. Unless the board wishes to conduct the sale itself, which requires strict compliance with notice and procedure, the association may appoint the undersigned as substitute trustee to execute the foreclosure sale. In other words, sign the paper and the attorneys handle everything. Don't sign, and we're left either paralyzed or forced to conduct the sale ourselves. Greg tapped the letter with his finger. We're not running a charity. If we let this slide, others will follow. Pretty soon no one will pay. The residents in the audience murmured in agreement. One man raised his hand. I pay my dues every month. If he can't, that's his problem. Take his house. That's the rule. His bluntness made me wince, but I couldn't deny the sentiment was common. Fairness was the HOA's sacred word. But fairness isn't always justice. I kept thinking about the house itself. The overgrown grass, the cracked driveway, the sagging blinds. Signs of struggle, not malice. I imagined someone inside counting pennies at the kitchen table, staring at unopened envelopes, too ashamed to answer the door. And then I imagined my name on the paper that authorized his foreclosure. Greg broke the silence. The attorneys need one of us to sign. Secretary, treasurer, or president, it doesn't matter which. We just need a name. Linda spoke up first. I'll sign if needed, but honestly, I'd prefer Greg. As president, it makes the most sense. Greg frowned. I'm willing, but let's not kid ourselves. Whoever signs will have their name on a legal document tied to a foreclosure. Are we comfortable with that? My pen hovered over the minutes, unwilling to move. Comfortable? The word felt absurd. After the meeting, I lingered while Greg and Linda packed up. Do we really have no choice? I asked. Greg sighed. We have a duty. That money belongs to the community. The attorneys are clear. The only way forward is foreclosure. Unless you want to conduct the sale yourself. Conduct it ourselves? I repeated. He nodded. Post notices, handle bidding, manage the sale. All under Texas law. You want to do that? The very thought made me laugh nervously. Of course not. Then we sign, Greg said simply. Linda snapped her binder shut. The law empowers us to enforce the covenants. If we don't enforce them, we might as well dissolve the HOA. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, the letter on my nightstand, staring at the words acting by and through its board of directors. The attorneys said my signature wouldn't expose me personally. That it was the association, not me, wielding the power. But my name would still be there. My ink, my hand. I imagined standing in court, or worse, in front of angry neighbors. Why did you sign? Why did you take his home? The fear wasn't just legal, it was moral. Did I have the right to reduce someone's house to paperwork? Did any of us? The next day, I called the attorney's office. A paralegal answered. I have a question, I said, my voice tight. If I sign this authorization, am I personally liable in any way? No, she said smoothly. You're acting as a director of the association, not in your individual capacity. But my name is still on the document. Yes, because the association can only act through individuals. But liability remains with the entity. Her answer was calm, logical, and did nothing to ease my unease. When I hung up, I realized something. The attorneys weren't worried. Greg wasn't worried. Linda wasn't worried. But I was. And that meant the decision wasn't about legality anymore. It was about conscience. The next time we met as a board, the attorneys were present. Not just letters and invoices this time, but actual people, two of them, both in dark suits that seemed too sharp for our tired little clubhouse. Their briefcases hit the table with the weight of inevitability. The taller one introduced himself as Mr. Harris, lead counsel for our association. The shorter one, Ms. Castillo, handled most of the day-to-day casework. They looked around the room with polite, practiced smiles, But I felt the undertone. They weren't here to debate. They were here to move the process forward. Greg, ever the steady president, welcomed them. "Thank you for coming. We want to make sure everything's done properly." "Of course," Mr. Harris said. His voice was calm, but it carried the confidence of someone who'd had this same conversation dozens of times. The association has every right to enforce its covenants. The homeowner at 1420 Oakview is severely delinquent. The power of sale under Texas property code is clear. The question is not whether you can foreclose, but how you wish to proceed. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. I recognized the authorization form among them, the one that had haunted me for weeks. Ms. Castillo leaned forward. "Here's what the statute allows. The association, acting by and through its board of directors, has the authority to conduct a non-judicial foreclosure sale. That means you don't need a judge. You have the power yourselves. However, in practice, most boards don't want to handle the notices, postings, and auction. That's why you appoint us, the attorneys, as substitute trustee. We conduct the sale on your behalf." Her words were smooth, practiced. She had said them before. "So all we need," Mr. Harris added, tapping the paper, "is for one of you to sign this authorization." His pen lay neatly across the page, an invitation, or a trap. Linda spoke first. "And signing this doesn't expose us personally?" "Not at all," Ms. Castillo said. "You're not signing as individuals. You're signing in your capacity as directors of the association. Liability remains with the association, not with you." Greg nodded. "That's what I understood as well." I felt all their eyes shift toward me. "But my name will be on it," I said quietly. "Yes," Mr. Harris said. "Because the association can only act through its directors. That's how corporate entities work. Someone must sign. Couldn't it just say, Board of Directors without listing a name?" I asked. He shook his head gently. "Courts don't accept signatures from abstractions. They require a human being to act as representative. That's the law." The words made sense, but they did nothing to settle the unease in my stomach. Greg, sensing my hesitation, jumped in. "Look, one of us has to sign. That's the reality. We can't let this drag on forever. The debt's almost $8,000 now. If we don't enforce, we undermine the entire system." Ms. Castillo nodded encouragingly. "Exactly. And remember, this isn't personal. You're not the one foreclosing. The association is. You're simply authorizing us to carry out the process you already voted for." The way she said it, calm, almost soothing, made it sound like I was being unreasonable. Like my fear was childish. Carl, a homeowner who had shown up to watch, raised his hand from the back of the room. "Why are we even hesitating? Guy doesn't pay, Guy loses his house. That's the deal we all agreed to when we bought here. End of story." Murmurs of agreement followed. I felt my face heat. It was easy for them to say. They didn't have to put their names on the dotted line. I flipped through the documents again, stalling. The legal language was thick. Notice of default. Appointment of substitute trustee. Power of sale. It all sounded so clinical, so detached. But beneath it was something visceral. The reality that this paper would set in motion a process that ended with a neighbor losing his home. I imagined the auction on the courthouse steps, strangers bidding on the property. I imagined the homeowner, whoever he was, walking out with his belongings piled into boxes. And my name, my signature, would be on the document that made it possible. "Could the association appoint you directly?" I asked, "without one of our names?" Ms. Castillo smiled faintly, as though I'd asked a question she'd heard 100 times. "The association isn't a person. It can't hold a pen. It can only act through its board. That's you. It has to be one of you. And if we don't sign?" Mr. Harris answered bluntly. "Then you'd have to conduct the foreclosure yourselves. Post notices, hold the sale, manage the proceeds. Do you have the expertise to handle that?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Greg broke it. All right, we've heard the options. Either we sign, or we attempt a foreclosure ourselves. I don't see any world where we handle it ourselves. Linda agreed. I say we sign. We can't let one delinquent destroy the budget for everyone else. All eyes turned back to me. I swallowed hard. And if something goes wrong? If the homeowner sues? Mr. Harris leaned forward. Then they sue the association, not you. That's the protection of corporate governance. Your personal assets are not at risk. Your name may appear, Ms. Castillo added gently, but it's symbolic. It's not liability. Symbolic. That was the word she chose. But symbols carry weight. When the meeting ended, the papers remained on the table. Greg signed one copy without hesitation, his pen scratching smoothly across the page. Linda followed. Then the form slid toward me. I stared at the blank line, my name hovering in my mind. The attorneys smiled patiently, as though waiting for a child to finish their vegetables. I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. And I froze. That night, I couldn't shake the image of the blank line waiting for my name. My hand had hovered, frozen, while Greg and Linda signed with the confidence of people who either knew something I didn't, or had simply convinced themselves there was nothing to fear. But I wasn't convinced. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, lazy circles. The room was dark, but my mind was anything but. Over and over, I imagined scenarios. A judge calling my name in a courtroom, a homeowner pointing at me in anger, my neighbors whispering, "He's the one who took his house." The attorneys had been so sure, so smooth. No liability, only symbolic. But I'd been alive long enough to know that symbolic doesn't stop someone from suing. And even if they lost, even if my personal assets were safe, my name could still get dragged through the mud. I wasn't just signing as a director. I was signing as me. The next morning, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. If the attorneys wanted me to trust them, I needed proof. I typed, HOA Foreclosure Board Member Liability Texas, into the search bar. Dozens of articles popped up, some from law firms, others from HOA watchdog blogs. One headline made my stomach twist. HOA board members personally named in foreclosure lawsuit. I clicked. The article explained that while board members were usually shielded from personal liability, plaintiffs sometimes named them individually anyway. Even if the case got dismissed, the stress, the time, the embarrassment, it was real. Another forum thread caught my eye. A man in Houston described being personally served with papers at his job after his HOA foreclosed on a neighbor. "I wasn't liable in the end," he wrote, "but I'll never forget the look on my boss's face when the sheriff delivered the summons. It was humiliating." I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. That was exactly what I feared. Later that afternoon, I called a friend of mine, Robert, who had served on a different HOA board years ago. "Ever had to sign foreclosure papers?" I asked him. "Twice," he said without hesitation. "Ugly business. But the law's on your side. You're acting as part of the corporation, not personally. Did you worry about liability?" "Of course," he admitted. "Everyone does the first time." But nothing happened. The homeowner either pays up once they realize you're serious, or the process plays out. "It's not on you. But your name, yeah, it's on there," he said. "But think about it this way. Judges, lawyers, even clerks all know the difference. You're not foreclosing as Robert Smith the neighbor. You're foreclosing as Robert Smith, director of the association. That's a shield." I wanted to believe him. That evening, I bumped into a neighbor while walking my dog. She knew I was on the board and, like everyone else, she'd heard whispers about the foreclosure. "Are you really going to take his house?" she asked, half intrigued, half scandalized. "It's the process," I said carefully. Her eyes narrowed. "But you're the one signing, right?" The question hit me like a slap. I forced a smile. The board acts collectively. But I walked away rattled. If regular homeowners thought of it as me personally foreclosing, what would the delinquent homeowner think? What would he say if he saw my name on the papers? That night, I considered resigning. The thought scared me, but it also tempted me. If I stepped down, I wouldn't have to sign anything. I wouldn't have to carry the weight of someone else's home on my conscience. I pulled up the bylaws and read the section on vacancies. If I resigned, the board could appoint a replacement until the next election. It wouldn't cripple them. The process would go on without me. For an hour, I stared at the resignation template on my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. But then I imagined Greg's face. His disdain for conflict, his determination to project strength. If I resigned, he'd say I'd abandoned my duty. He'd tell the community I couldn't handle the responsibility. Maybe he'd be right. I closed the laptop without typing a word. The next day, I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney, not our HOA's lawyer, but someone independent. In his office, surrounded by shelves of thick law books, I explained my situation. He listened patiently, then leaned back in his chair. "Here's the truth," he said. "As a board member, you have fiduciary duties, duty of care, duty of loyalty. As long as you act within those duties, you're generally protected from personal liability. Foreclosure is within your authority, as long as it's done according to statute and your governing documents. But what if the homeowner sues me personally?" I asked. "They might," he admitted. "People can sue anyone for anything. But the case won't stick if you were acting within your role. The association's insurance should cover defense costs. You're not personally at risk financially. And reputationally?" He gave a small shrug. "That's different. Your name will be on the documents. If the homeowner's angry, they might single you out. That's the burden of leadership." The burden of leadership. The phrase landed heavy. Driving home, I replayed the consultation. Legally, I was probably safe. But emotionally, I wasn't. That evening, I pulled into the driveway and saw the delinquent house across the street. It was quiet, curtains drawn. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, wondering what story lay behind those walls. Was it arrogance, defiance, pride? Or desperation, depression, hopelessness? Either way, soon it would be someone else's. And if I signed, that transfer would begin with my pen. I went inside, sat at my desk, and opened the foreclosure packet again. The blank line stared back at me. I didn't sign. Not yet. But I knew the day was coming when I'd have to decide. My conscience or my duty. The next meeting was unlike any we'd had before. Word of the foreclosure had spread through the neighborhood, and people came out in numbers I hadn't seen in years. Usually, we were lucky if a dozen residents showed up. That night, the clubhouse was full, every folding chair taken, some people standing along the walls, arms crossed, eyes fixed on us at the front table. The delinquent homeowner wasn't there. I half expected him to storm in and shout, but his absence made the tension worse. People whispered about him like he was a ghost haunting the room. Greg opened the meeting with his usual gavel tap, but his voice carried less authority than usual. "We'll begin with the main agenda item. Foreclosure proceedings for 1420 Oakview." The room hushed immediately. Mr. Harris and Ms. Castillo, the attorneys, were back. They took their seats beside us, briefcases on the table, papers neatly stacked. They looked comfortable, like generals preparing for a battle they'd already won. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Harris began, his voice calm but firm, "the homeowner at 1420 Oakview owes the association over $8,000 in unpaid assessments and fees. The board has a fiduciary duty to act. Tonight, the decision is simple. Authorize us to proceed with foreclosure, or assume the burden of enforcement yourselves." He slid the authorization form forward, the same one that had haunted me for weeks. Linda jumped in immediately. This has gone on too long. We've sent letters, offered payment plans, and been ignored. Enough is enough. If we don't enforce, we invite chaos." Several homeowners applauded. One man shouted, "That's right." Greg nodded, his gavel tapping nervously against the table. "The community cannot carry dead weight. Every dollar he refuses to pay comes out of our pockets." The crowd murmured agreement. I could feel the momentum building, a tide pulling me toward inevitability. I cleared my throat. I understand the frustration, but we need to ask ourselves what it means for one of us to sign this. It's not just a formality. Our names go on this document. We are personally authorizing the loss of someone's home. A woman in the back raised her hand, her tone sharp. So what? He had choices. We all pay our dues. Why should he get away with not paying? Because taking someone's home is extreme, I said, my voice louder now. This isn't a parking violation. This is foreclosure. Once we sign, there's no turning back. The room erupted into chatter. Some people nodded, others rolled their eyes. Mr. Harris leaned in, his tone patient but firm, like a teacher addressing a stubborn student. "Director, with respect, this is not your personal decision. This is the association's decision. You are simply acting as its representative. Your signature does not make you the villain. It makes you the executor of the board's collective will." But his words only sharpened the knot in my stomach. Carl, a homeowner who had been particularly vocal, stood from his seat. "Listen, my wife and I pay every month, on time. If this guy can just skip out, what message does that send? I say foreclose. Sell his house. Bring in someone who respects the community." Cheers rippled through the room. I saw the attorneys exchange a satisfied glance. The crowd was on their side now. Linda looked directly at me. "We need all 3 signatures. Are you going to be the one who blocks this?" Her words landed like a punch. Suddenly I wasn't just hesitating, I was holding the process hostage. "I'm not trying to block it," I said carefully. "I just want to be sure we understand the weight of this decision." "Wait?" Greg snapped, frustration finally showing. "The weight is $8,000 missing from our budget. The weight is every homeowner in this room covering for one man's defiance. That's the weight I care about." Applause again. Mr. Harris slid the paper closer. "Directors, the law is clear. The process is clear. All that's left is for you to sign." The pen gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My heart hammered in my chest. I glanced at the audience. Dozens of eyes bore into me, waiting, judging. Some filled with anger, others with impatience. A few, maybe, with sympathy. I glanced at Greg and Linda. Their pens already rested on the paper, their signatures neat and final. Now it was just me. I thought about the delinquent homeowner. I thought about the foreclosure auction, the boxes on the curb, the whispers in the neighborhood. I thought about my name etched into the public record as the man who had signed his fate. But then I thought about the budget spreadsheets Linda had shown us, the pool maintenance bill due next month, the insurance premium coming up. The math didn't lie. One man's debt was everyone's burden. I was trapped between conscience and duty, between morality and math. Finally, I spoke. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "I will not sign tonight." Gasps filled the room. Greg's jaw tightened, Linda's eyes blazed. Mr. Harris frowned, his pen frozen midair. "Director, with respect." "With respect," I interrupted, my voice louder now, "I want this discussed in executive session. Without attorneys. Without pressure. If we're going to put our names on this, we deserve the chance to weigh it fully." The room exploded in chatter, some supportive, most angry. Greg slammed the gavel. "Order. Order." We voted on my motion. To my surprise, Susan, the quietest board member, raised her hand in support. "Seconded," she said softly. Greg glared but counted the votes. 2 in favor. 2 against. Deadlock. As secretary, I was expected to break ties. And in that moment, I realized the decision still rested squarely on my shoulders. The days after that meeting felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Everywhere I went in the neighborhood, walking the dog, checking the mailbox, passing cars at the stop sign, I felt eyes on me. Maybe it was paranoia, but I swear people looked at me differently, as if they knew I was the one holding the fate of 1420 Oakview in my hands. Greg barely spoke to me outside of official business. Linda sent clipped emails, full of numbers and deadlines but empty of warmth. The attorneys were polite but persistent, reminding us that time was of the essence, that every day we delayed added more costs to the ledger. And the delinquent house just sat there, silent, its curtains drawn, its yard unkempt. A house in limbo. We called an executive session, just the board. No homeowners, no attorneys, no crowd. Greg wasted no time. We can't drag this out any longer. We've delayed enough. Either we sign, or we admit we can't do our jobs. Linda nodded sharply. The community is watching. They expect action. If we don't enforce the covenants, we undermine everything. Susan, quiet as ever, finally spoke. But we also can't ignore conscience. I support enforcement, but I understand the hesitation about personal signatures. They all looked at me. I took a deep breath. I'm not against foreclosure. I'm against being forced to sign without real protection. The attorneys say it's symbolic, that there's no liability. But symbolism matters. My name on that paper is not nothing. Greg leaned forward. So what do you propose? Insurance, I said. If we're going to put our names on these documents, I want it in writing that the association's liability coverage protects us fully, including legal defense if anyone sues us personally. I also want the board to vote, formally, that signatures are by order of the board, not as individuals acting alone. Linda frowned. That's redundant. Everyone knows. No, I interrupted. We write it. We vote it. We document it. That way, if anyone comes after me, I can point to the minutes and say, this was the board, not me. Silence followed. Greg finally sighed. Fine. Draft the resolution. So I did. At the next meeting, before the attorneys even opened their briefcases, I read the resolution aloud. Resolved, that any signatures on foreclosure-related documents are made solely in the capacity of directors of the association, representing the collective decision of the board, and that the association's liability insurance shall defend and indemnify directors for any claims arising from such actions. We voted. 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Passed. Only then did I pick up the pen. My hand still shook, but this time, when I signed, I felt less like a lone scapegoat and more like part of a shield wall. The board stood behind me, the association stood behind us, and the insurance policy stood behind them. Layers of protection, however thin, gave me enough to move forward. The attorneys took the papers, thanked us, and left to do their work. The foreclosure machine was now in motion. Notices would be posted. A sale date would be set. Sooner or later, 1420 Oakview would belong to someone else. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood changed. Some residents congratulated us. Finally, one man said, "You showed him we're serious." Others were less enthusiastic. "Feels harsh," one woman muttered at the mailbox. Kicking someone out of their home? Overdues? I didn't know how to respond. Both reactions were true. The house itself grew even more desolate. No cars in the driveway. No lights at night. It felt less like a home and more like a monument to conflict. A reminder that behind every HOA policy, every covenant, there were human lives at stake. When the foreclosure auction came, I didn't attend. I couldn't. But Greg did. He reported back afterward. 2 investors bid. Sold above the owed amount. We'll recover the debt, plus legal fees. The board celebrated. The books balanced. The HOA's power was intact. But I didn't celebrate. That night, I walked past 1420 Oakview one last time. The porch light was out, the windows dark. Soon, someone new would move in. They'd pay their dues, mow their lawn, hang their flag. The house would blend back into the neighborhood's tidy rhythm, as though nothing had happened. But I'd remember. I'd remember the late nights, the sick knot in my stomach, the feeling of the pen in my hand. I'd remember the lesson that power isn't abstract, it's real, and it's sharp, and it cuts deep. In the end, I realized something sobering. HOAs like ours are made up of neighbors. Ordinary people. Volunteers. But when the law empowers ordinary people with extraordinary authority, like the power to take someone's home, it turns us into something else. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were arbiters of survival. Gatekeepers of property. Judges without robes. And no matter what the bylaws or the insurance policies said, that weight didn't disappear when I set down the pen. It lived with me. It still does.
Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Have you ever dealt with something this absurd in your own neighborhood? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode.